Today we start with You Can Change the World, The Christopher Approach by James Keller. Taylor Cadwell says this is a book for Protestant, Jew, and Catholic. Well, perhaps if the Jew can get past the Christian twist on some of these Greek and whatever words, sure. And Catholic. This is a book which ought to be required reading in every religious seminary, well, churchy seminary, not quite the same thing as religious, in every school course. It should be in every home, and parents and children should read it together, for here is life and goodness, hope and faith. The Minneapolis Tribune says, in a world which has messed up plans for peace and goodwill, the Christopher idea sounds well worth trying. The Saturday Review of Literature says, a simple, explosive, contagious idea. And if ideas are as important as we have been taught to believe, this one may in truth change the world. Irene Doone says, it isn't often that hundreds of thousands of ordinary people like you and me can save a book that was written just for me. Here at last is the book which tells us not only why something ought to be done about the world, but also tells us how it can be done and by whom. And we have one more review before we The New York Herald Tribune has dynamic, thought-provoking, and intensely practical. This book tells in clear, specific terms how your role in life, though it may be a humble one, can be a vital force in creating a decent world for all of us, with dramatic use of incidents from everyday life and frequent reference to actual events. Father Keller shows how you can influence your fellow man. How, whether you are Protestant, Jew, or Catholic, you can work for the good of all within your own limited sphere. You can change the world is, in short, a shift from the selfish defensive to the unselfish offensive. And for this purpose, the book might be called a manual of arms, explaining the Christophers. By way of introduction, did you ever stop to think that the United States is being effectively undermined by less than 1% of the people of our country? Well, pretty much every country, right? Of whom only a portion are communists. Nearly everyone in this 1% has a militant hatred for the basic truths upon which this nation is founded. I don't know if it's quite that. And without which it cannot endure. That each and every human being is a child of God. Well, we're in human bodies from human parents, and there's psychological issues that come up to even think that there's a child of God, and it's even a stronger level of arrogance to think that, one's a child of God, but of course a Christian will call this humility. Created in his image and likeness. Well, if you look at the biblical terms, it's not that we look like God, it's that us and the rest of creation is really a reflection of divine power, or divine whatever. That he gets his fundamental rights from God, not from the state. And the chief purpose of the state, as the Founding Fathers repeatedly affirmed in the Declaration of Independence, is to protect these God-given rights. These few are not content to keep their hatred of God and country to themselves, as everyone driven by such a perverse hatred is automatically a missioner. Those in this group invariably make it their business to get in touch with one of the four influential spheres of activity, which touch and sway the majority of the people: education, government, labor management, writing, newspapers, magazines, books, radio, motion pictures, television. It is our conviction that 1% of the normal, decent citizens of America can be found who are willing to get into the mainstream of American life as Christophers and work hard to restore it to the divine truth and human integrity, as the other 1% are striving furiously to eliminate these values. The word Christopher is derived from the Greek word Christophoros, meaning Christ-bearer. Well, Christ, not in Greek, not meaning the same thing it does to the Christian. It means, kind of like Messiah. It means like anointed. But it doesn't mean divine in any way. It means it's a secondary figure. One of the best ways to get rid of weeds is to plant something in their stead. The big need, therefore, is to encourage people with good ideas to go to the marketplace rather than to concentrate too much on driving out those with evil designs. The role of the Christopher. The Christopher goes into the marketplace into a job of his or her own choosing without fanfare or flag waving, without doing anything sensational. His or her simple task is to insist on truth where others are intent on furthering falsehood, to establish order where others are spreading confusion. Where there is hate, he tries to bring in love. Where there is darkness, he carries light, always striving to implant more firmly the fundamentals which others are trying to uproot. The Christopher emphasizes the normal rather than the abnormal. Nothing remarkable may ever be required beyond a generous spirit of courage and daring. He or she expects to do the usual, not the unusual, the ordinary, not the extraordinary, knowing that while the steady fulfillment of duty often requires plodding devotion and day-by-day hard work, even monotonous drudgery, yet this continuing sacrifice is constantly lightened by a driving purpose. The most trivial and tiresome task achieves significance and dignity when done for Christ, who said, "My yoke is sweet and my burden light." Matthew 11:30. The Christopher will often work quietly, even silently, as leaven works in dough, yet never stealthily nor underhandedly. The Christopher should ask no favors, seek no privileges, look for no special attention, be ready for neglect, misunderstanding, and suffering. Sounds like the Christopher is left-wing too, not, the communist. He's, yeah, fine, be satisfied with a mediocre position or whatnot, but, trying to be exceptional, the biblical Zionism idea, but he or she is ever aware that the important thing is to be there as Christ commanded, even if nothing more is achieved than filling one spot, which otherwise might be occupied by one bent on subversion or perversion. This is no small accomplishment in itself, but far more than this results. The very presence of a bearer of Christ is, in any sphere, means that Christ is there. Christ is also present there through a personal representative who acts as an instrument of his grace. Now, of course, that means that whoever you're calling Christ is not omnipresent or doesn't have a divine power like that, but it's a consciousness of carrying on the influence, right? Overcoming evil by good. The overall problem facing our country as well as the world is materialistic atheism. Communism is only one expression of this godlessness. Even if communism disappeared overnight, the problem is still a tremendous one. An enormous missionary task still remains to be done. The despiritualizing process which has taken place during the last 75 years is approaching its logical conclusion in our own day and age. Worldwide reduction of men to the level of the beast, with resultant misery, hatred, destruction, and wholesale murder. In every country that the godless have undermined and eventually destroyed, they first swarmed into the main fields of public influence. They taught millions over the earth to have a false outlook on life, to ignore their eternal destiny. Too many of those who believe in God, instead of getting into the thick of things and overcoming evil with good, have withdrawn into a world apart from the frightening realities around them. For them, the words of the Apostle Paul have added significance. Be not overcome by evil, but overcome evil by good. Romans 12:21. The awful challenge of our times demands more than understanding and sympathy, more than token performance. We are bidden by the Prince of Peace not to cease our efforts until we have brought his sublime message to all men of all nations. Now, where does Jesus make himself unique as being one with God. Certainly that one reference, flip a couple pages, it's one with his buddies, right? Or where, you know, the object of the Christopher movement, therefore, is to develop a sense of personal responsibility and initiative in bringing back into the marketplace the major truths which alone guarantee peace for all mankind, the achievements of tens of thousands who have already gone as Christophers into the four fields of influence, are inspiring hope for the peaceful transformation that will take place when their number reaches 1,000,000. Each Christopher carries Christ with them, individually and personally, into the dust and heat of the marketplace, into the highways as well as the byways, thereby helping to change for the better the trends abroad in the world today. Each Christopher knows he is called by Christ himself to be a fisher of men, but he knows also that the best fisherman in the world cannot catch a single fish if he is 2 miles away from the water, just talking about fish. The distinguishing mark. Love of all people should be the distinguishing mark of every Christopher. He must guard against the dangerous tendency which is developing among many people of otherwise sound judgment, who are beginning to return hatred for hatred instead of meeting hatred with love. As never before, we need to remember that Christ died for all men, even for the whole spirit of the Christopher movement. By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. John 13:35. The more one brings Christ into his own personal living, the better he will be able to bring Christ into the lives of others. He will pray for all. This means showing love for all is at the disposal of everybody. Now, that doesn't mean you have to love everything that everybody believes or does, but, you know, go to all. One of the greatest tributes ever paid Christ was that he went about doing good. We likewise must mingle with all men, even those who know him not. So as far as in our power to do so, we should not expect them to come to us. And one of the questions really is, why would anybody, even 100, well, this is not quite 100 years ago, but why would anybody even 100 years ago think that people don't know about Christianity? Teach all. People are won or lost by ideas, not by things. Subversives seldom, putting one stone upon another in building anything, stick tenaciously to the realm of ideas. Through ideas, fallacious as they are, they have swayed the outlook of millions over the earth. They knew that whoever controls the thought of man controls all else. But the only way to overcome bad ideas is to replace them with good ideas. The immutable principles of Christ. Christ tells us to preach the gospel to every creature. He bids us to go unto the whole world, to all men, to be daring for love of others. He urges us to launch out into the deep with the assurance that I am with you all days. A positive personal love of all, even those who hate, is absolutely essential. Complaining and criticizing accomplish little or nothing. A Christopher spends his time improving, not disapproving. Not disapproving, because he knows that it's better to light one candle than to curse the darkness. Of course, I'm sure cursing the darkness is more fun. If 1,000,000 persons go as Christ-bearers into every sphere of life, they will bring love where there is hate, the light of Christian principles where there has been only darkness and error. See, that's the thing. It's not so black and white that, it's, that Christianity is that unique, The scope of Christophers, rather than institute a new organization, the Christopher movement limits itself to one phase of a big problem: emphasis on individual responsibility and individual initiative. for the common good of all, regardless of whether one is working on an individual basis or in any one of many excellent and essential organizations. Because Christophers realize that they are not merely individuals but also social beings, they do not stand aside, realizing their kinship with all others because they are brothers and sisters in Christ. They feel a sense of personal responsibility to work for the corporate good of all, no matter what sacrifice may be entailed. They do not necessarily seek to go up to material success in life. They seek to go deep into life, into everything and anything that concerns the welfare of mankind. But they may be in positions which are in themselves unimportant, but which they make of the greatest importance, because as Christ bearers, they can be effectual instruments of His truth and love. Well, certainly it all adds up, right? The purpose of this book is submitted as a guidebook or textbook for the individual use of Christophers, either in the work they do alone or in their work in any organizations to which they see fit to belong. It is not intended as a book for experts. Neither is it a literary work. Rather, it is an ABC for the average person who, becoming more and more disturbed by the rapid trend towards paganism, let's drop the hate speech. Pagan and heathen have nothing to do with people's religion, really. It's material culture terms, that's it. Feels helpless, frustrated, only because he is not aware of the vital role he can play, personally and individually, in reversing that trend. And it was not prepared to be read at one sitting. Rather, it is a reference book or manual, and its various sections are addressed to persons with various objectives in life. Hence, throughout this book, there is an intentional repetition of the basic theme, because many will wish to read only those sections of particular interest to themselves. This book, prepared with the advice of those who are experts in the specific fields covered in this volume, contains simple fundamental ideas repeated through varied applications which have been found practicable and worthwhile. Well-trained people in far greater numbers that are now available are needed, to be sure, but they must be supplemented by 1 million or more average men and women who, as bearers of Christ in the marketplace, are thereby so many small channels of His grace. They depend much more on God, much less on human techniques, which ultimately fence in those who are against God. Millions are needed. Christ meant it that way. He wanted large numbers of lay apostles to work at the business of saving the world. For the harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Luke 10:2. Introducing this book or any portion of it into a family circle, a classroom, a gathering, or an organization of any kind would constitute what we regard as the formation of a Christopher school. It is, for example, as though a women's club should introduce a cooking school at which the members come together for a short time to study the principles of cooking, using an accepted cookbook as their text, and then go out and put those principles into practice in whatever sphere they find themselves. Since the publication of this volume, another Christopher book, Careers That Change Your World, has been published in both cloth editions, Doubleday, and a perma edition, Garden City. It is intended to be used jointly with the present volume as a text or guide for career guidance schools. Our aim is to have 5,000 of these schools established on an informal basis throughout the country. One can be started in any kind of group, schools, clubs, discussion groups, families, etc. The Christopher School, like the Christopher Movement, is not a formal institution or organization, but the carrying or spreading of an idea to those who do not possess it by individual Christ bearers acting as messengers. In short, the Christopher School, like the cooking school, may be introduced anywhere, with this guidebook serving as the basic textbook. Since we limit our efforts to the developing of personal initiative and responsibility, we do not authorize Christopher groups or clubs of any kind. All we can authorize are the contents of this approved volume. Each individual chooses as he or she thinks will best serve the cause, whether he or she will function individually or under proper authority. To help spark some already existing organization, we lay down no tailor-made techniques. We confine ourselves to the broad pursuit of major principles and rely on the refreshing resourcefulness God has placed in every individual to do the rest. The simple freedom allows the greater originality, more imagination, enterprise, and daring, and more enduring dynamism. The Christopher position. The Christopher movement is under Catholic auspices, much like a lot of the interfaith stuff, but this isn't interfaith. By the very fact that it is Catholic, it is deeply concerned for time and for eternity with the welfare of all men, even of those whose background makes them hostile to religion. Well, I'm not sure that's quite how it works, is people have independent morality and the ability to choose within their means once they're adolescents. I mean, unless they have early puberty disorder, then maybe it takes another couple years or, but in loving solicitude, we are bound to include all and exclude none. Each is a child of God, at least through creation. Well, then not at all, but a metaphor, right? Each doing even one thing for him can start to be a Christopher, a light bearer. The movement has no chapters, no committees, no meetings. There are no memberships, no dues. Rather than have a large membership paying dues and doing nothing, we have from the beginning set out to encourage tens of thousands to do something and pay nothing. Literature on the Christopher movement, including monthly news notes, is sent free of charge to more than 400,000 people in this country and overseas, and may be obtained without cost by writing to the central headquarters of the Christophers in New York City. For the material means to carry on the Christopher program, our motto is the simple one inscribed on every American coin: "In God we trust." For routine expenses of $500,000 a year, or approximately $40,000 a month, the Christopher movement depends entirely on the voluntary offerings of those who see fit to assist it. We are incorporated under the legal title of the Christophers Incorporated. The Christophers, 18 East 48th Street, New York, 17, New York. Father James Keller, MM Director. Not sure if that's a valid address or whatever nowadays. A good chance it still is, particularly being, in New York City. New York 17, yeah. God willing, this tiny spark may one day burst into a flame. Fortunately, we have to manufacture nothing. Our product is made in heaven. All we have to do is become distributors of a changeless truth in our changing times, ever conscious that there can be neither peace nor freedom without that truth which will make you free. Above all, we are fortified with the reassuring conviction that none of us works alone, that Christ works with and through each and every one who would be a Christ-bearer. A Christopher. By our living presence in the mainstream of life, we can, with God's grace, help renew the face of the earth. James Keller.